Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
wabarakatuh.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Morning, Vi.
Okay, thank you so much for your attendance today. So, we are from group 9. So, today we will present our material titled Language Contact Part 2, which is focusing on Pidgins, Creoles, and New Englishes. But before we get into the material, we would like to introduce our group member, starting with me. Next slide, please. Starting with me, my name is Vivi Alvanella Amir. As the moderator for today's presentation. Also, there are Muhammad Aditya Inzaghi, Nur Asya, and Nur Isma Wardani. Next slide, please. Okay, today's presentation, there are 8 topics that will be discussed. The first one is language context, Pidgins, characteristic of Pidgins, theories of origin of Pidgins, Creoles, characteristic of Creoles, New Englishes, and the example of New Englishes. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the first material that will be presented by No. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So I will explain about the material is what is a language contact. Language contact happens when people who speak different language have to communicate with each other. Over time, these interactions can give rise to new language. This language often blend elements from all the language involved, creating something entirely new. Jadi, kita akan fokus pada 3 hasil kontak belahan dunia karena perdagangan, kolonisasi, dan keadaan sejarah lainnya. Okay, next please. Okay, the next material is what are Pidgins? Imagine a busy marketplace where traders from different regions meet, but they don't speak the same language. They can spend years learning each other's language, so they create a simplified system of communication, a Pidgin. A Pidgin takes vocabulary from different language but simplifies the grammar so everyone can understand basic ideas. Contohnya ini adalah ada di Cameroon. Jadi versi Pidgin dalam bahasa Inggris itu the small swine he been chop soup with fufu. Di mana chop di sini berarti makan dan fufu adalah sebuah makanan yang terbuat dari singkong. Meskipun kedengarannya sangat berbeda dari bahasa Inggris standar, ini adalah alat komunikasi yang berfungsi penuh. Okay, I think that's all for me. I give it back to moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. Now, next will be presented by Kak Adit. Time is yours.
Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So thank you, moderator, for the opportunity. So Pidgins are interesting because no one speaks them as their first language. They develop to solve specific communication needs. They use simplified grammar and vocabulary, often relying on context. For example, in Cameroon Pidgin English, the word shadow can mean shadow, soul, or even reflection. Next slide, please. So next, actually, the origins of Pidgins are complex, and no single theory can fully explain how they developed. But here are some theories about it. The first one is the monogenesis theory, offers a historical perspective showing how early Portuguese traders might have influenced Pidgins around the world. The independent parallel development theory explains how similar social conditions led to the creation of pigeons in different regions, while the linguistic universals theory highlights the natural human tendency to simplify language in context situations. Together, these theories help us understand the fascinating evolutions of pigeons. I think that's all from me. I hand it back to moderator.
Okay, thank you so much, Kak Adit. Next will be presented by no Isma. Time is yours.
Thank you, moderator, for giving me this chance. I will explain about what are Creoles. So, Creoles involve when a pidgin becomes the native language of a community. They develop more complex structure as they go a step further. When a community starts using pidgin as its main language, children who grow up speaking it will naturally make the language more complex. This process creates a crow. Unlike pidgins, Creoles have full grammatical system and can express a wide range of ideas. A good example is Guyanese Creole, which developed in the Caribbean. A sentence like Maanin sun abibina gubakdam shows how the language used its own structure to say something like in the morning we went to fetch water. Characteristic of Creoles: fully developed grammar, complex tense marker, and sentence structure. A Creole is a full language just like any other. It has more complex grammatical rules than a pidgins. For example, a crow can clearly indicate when something happened in the past or will happen in the future. Its vocabulary, its vocabulary grows over time, borrowing words from the dominant colonial language as well as local languages. Haitian Creole is a well-known Creole language that originated from French but has evolved into its own distinct language spoken by millions of people today. I think that's all for me. I'll give it back to the moderator.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation, Isma. Next, the material will be presented by myself. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, what are new Englishes? So, when English was introduced to many parts of world through colonization, it didn't stay the same. Like instead, it mixed with local languages and developed into something new, what we call new Englishes. Jadi, this variation of English borrows heavily from local culture, and their structure is often different from British and American. For example, in Singapore, people might say can lah, yang artinya tuh ya bisa, yes, it can be done. Uh, because due to in Singapore, there are percampuran culture with Malay, Tamil, and Chinese. Makanya kultur-kultur ini tuh tercampur dan lahirnya sebuah bahasa baru yang dinamakan New Englishes. Okay, next. Okay, example of New Englishes. So, New Englishes blend English with the linguistic rules of local languages. For example, it's common to see pronouns copying, where a sentence like people they don't believe that now that repeats the subject for emphasis. So another feature is the use of invariant question tags, like isn't at, at, at the end of statements, regardless of the sentence structure. So this happens in many places, like such as in India or Singapore, even in Indonesia, though, and even the local people or the native speakers speaks like this. So I think that's all for me. You got it right. Okay, I think that's all for our presentation material of language contact that focusing on Pidgins, Creoles, and New Englishes. Next, we opened a quick Q&A session. You guys may raise your hand. Okay, Suci Rahmawati, please.
Okay, I want to ask for the group. My question is, how do Creoles challenge traditional linguistic theories of the evaluation of the language? I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Winda. Seems like she's right on chat box. Thank you, Winda. Next, Keisha Marcelo.
Okay, thanks. My question is, what role do historical factors such as trade, slavery, and colonialism play in the development of Pidgins and Creoles? And how do these factors shape the complexity of the resisting languages? I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Guys, can you write your question on the chat box? Okay. Is there any participants want to ask?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, my question is, how do New Englishes demonstrate the influence of local languages and cultures on English, and what linguistic features distinguish these varieties from traditional native English?
Okay, thank you so much, Halima. You may send your question on chat box.